Da, 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 da. Right, so I'm on my Discord, as you do, and I go and I ask if anyone has anything that they want reviewed. And Rose Davidson, she asks if there's, if documentaries count, and I say why not, and that's why I'm presently reviewing Following the Ninth, a documentary about Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. So the documentary itself begins with an anecdote about the English lyrics to Ode To Joy, a part of the Ninth Symphony, and that's interesting enough. But that's when we launch into this religious look at the beginning of the ninth and how it represents this religious rebirth and this religious birth of the universe, and immediately I know I'm about to learn a lot more about music than I ever did in the mandatory music classes that I used to have to take before I was starting my GCSEs. And I went and I looked afterwards, and sadly, there doesn't really seem to be any of the director interviews for Following the Ninth that are called Following the Ninth or anything. That's my sort of sense of humour. I like that sort of stupid naming conventions and such. Following the Ninth's name is rather apt, as it follows the Ninth Symphony itself, while at the same time following the history of the Ninth. It sort of blends the music and performance of it with the discussions of the different bits of the Ninth and the people relating to that. Now, this is, of course, the Ninth Symphony, and according to Wikipedia, the source of all my research for these videos, a symphony is an extended musical composition in Western classical music, most often written by composers for orchestra, and although the term has had meanings, many of those meanings throughout history, usually we just think of it these days as one of those things that the upper class goes to instead of movies. Now, the Ninth is traditionally also known as the final symphony of a composer, interestingly enough, with most composers dying or giving up before they ever get this far, and therefore succumbing to the fictional curse of the Ninth. Now, there's this single part of the Ninth Symphony that really stands out as having a bit more impact to the rest, and that's the Ode to Joy, since that's the one that comes up the most, really, out of Beethoven's Ninth and Following the Ninth. And really, in general, it's played a wee bit more than the rest of the Ninth, because whilst one can... there's not quite as much... I don't want to say that there's not as much value to the rest of the Ninth, but the Ode to Joy section is the most iconic for a bit of a reason. And it's since been used as national anthem, as protest song and such. And we follow a fair few of those whose lives have been touched by the Ode to Joy, and these are political process, of course, activists, and Billy Bragg, the British punk musician who opens this film with his anecdote about having performed the Ninth with the London Symphony Orchestra to Queen Elizabeth II with lyrics to the Ode to Joy in English. He'd gone and written those English lyrics himself, more of a thematic and a meaning translation than a literal one. Now, I don't really watch documentaries much. My attention span is short and usually extends only to the trivial and meaningless, hence why I can remember the plot of all 8 Saw movies and their most prominent traps, but I can't remember the name of a single character in the British film Franklin. It's a bit of an artsy one, and it's one that I quite enjoyed, but I could not tell you the name of a single character in that film. I think the main character's name is Franklin, and a cursory Google search will tell me that it isn't. Now, I wouldn't really have watched a documentary about Beethoven unless it had been recommended to me, and really this show is all about me recommending things, so here goes. Following the Ninth is a good documentary, and it has helped me to think more about the music I listen to and the meaning that a given song can have. And, well, particularly the number of other lives that a song can touch, because while... I mean, most people will have a given song they can relate the first time they heard it, the last time they heard it, whoever recommended it to them, if it had been recommended to them by a given person, and these sorts of like independent meanings. But there's this underlying poignance and connection almost when multiple people are linked to a single song that is remarkably older than the civilization that we're in now. It's one that's endured through world wars and cold wars and what have you, and one that's found this enduring meaning to the Ode to Joy and this universal love, joy, and freedom that it preaches. Yeah, Following the Ninth is good, and it really makes you think about the important things that Ode to Joy leaves behind, and the Ninth Symphony leaves behind, which is why I'm now going to talk about completely irrelevant things that the Ninth has left us behind, because while religious imagery and an enduring legacy can grant beauty to a song that has been a national anthem and all sorts of things to all sorts of people, today's media can of course utterly destroy your understanding of a piece of music just by making you think of dumb things whenever you think about them. So the beginning of Beethoven's Ninth will always remind me of the film Equilibrium, a dumb Gun Carter film starring Christian Bale as an emotionless man discovering how to feel for the very first time in a world where emotions are illegal. And he hears the beginning of Beethoven's Ninth when he's beginning to break through and experience emotions, and it's this beautiful and touching scene that's so packed full of meaning that you'll forget that he spends most of the rest of the movie killing fascists with kung fu. And this is the sort of Gun Carter film that would eventually give us the film Ultraviolet, of all things. The film version of Get Smart, to some extent, has Ode to Joy as this backdrop to a terrorist attack. It's just sort of like one of those ones... Get Smart is a bit of a forgettable comedy, really, and Ode to Joy is chosen because it's classical and it's kind of ironic to make a universal song of love the backdrop to a countdown to an explosion. But really the one that has completely ruined the Ninth Symphony, or more specifically Ode to Joy for me, is the film Cheaters. That's Cheaters but with a little A plus instead of an A and then a T in cheat. Cheaters perverts the song into a dirty limerick used by students to remember the answers to a multiple choice test. The film was a silly 2002 comedy with school antics and what have you, and all this talk of like, oh, well, we need somebody who can write really small or whatever to help us cheat on this test. But this one dirty limerick is what I always remember whenever I hear the start of Ode to Joy, and it has really made it hard to like that song again, just from a 2002 comedy that I once saw on the telly while I was still living in the United States. And it has been yonks since I was living in the United States. So I'm going to actually say these words, and if you have any love for the Ode to Joy, turn this video off now, take your headphones off or what have you. You have been warned. Crippled elves do dance around a devil covered by blue dress, Alaboozers in a cave and with a bear. That's all I can remember. Like I said, it has been yonks since I was in the States. Anywho, thanks for listening to this, a even more niche review than usual on my fairly niche channel of just me rambling into a microphone. Thanks again for listening, and I suppose if you have anything you'd like me to review, you could always mention as such in the comments, of which I have had none so far at the time of releasing this video. Rightio.